As soon as the COVID-19 vaccine started to be approved, and with different states having different regulations for who can qualify to get them, you knew that there were going to be efforts for people to game the system or jump the line, perhaps by traveling from one state to another. Well, joining us now to break down one form that's come in is a health reporter for Business Insider, Andrea Michelson. Welcome to the Damage Report.
Thanks for having me, John.
Very glad to have you on. And you wrote about vaccine tourism, which is an amazing term there. But can you tell us a little bit about what this is looking like?
Sure, yeah. So vaccine tourism is a term that's just used to describe people traveling from their home state or country to another state or country to get their COVID-19 vaccines. It can get a little bit murky because, of course, in some situations we have part-time residents of certain states, and they have to make the decision about where to get vaccinated. So it is quite a complicated issue.
And so why Florida? Well, why in particular is it happening with them?
Yeah, I think there are a couple reasons why it's happening in Florida. Towards the beginning of the vaccine rollout in the United States, Florida had one of the looser criterias for eligibility. They were opening up vaccine eligibility for seniors age 65 and older right away. A lot of states have switched to that model by now, but there was a period of time where a lot of people would qualify in Florida but wouldn't qualify in another state. I think it's also a complicated situation in Florida because, as I mentioned before, there is a population of part-time residents there, or snowbirds, people who typically winter in Florida. Some of them canceled their trips due to the pandemic, but others are there just existing in the community and kind of live in a weird bubble between vaccine tourism and actual residency.
And it seems like regardless of which of those two groups you live in, either someone who has a home for part of the year there, or if you're just traveling there to try to get it, it is likely, I assume, that these are people with significantly more financial means than many of those who are hoping to get the vaccine.
Right, I think that the true vaccine tourists, at least, a lot of them are financially well off and do have the connections to be able to book an appointment in Florida, even if they don't live there. You definitely need to be well connected or very lucky in order to get an appointment in most states, especially one where that's not your community. So that is pretty common, I would say.
And do we know anything about? So far, is Florida one of the states that's really going through all of the vaccine that's been made available to it, which would potentially produce a situation where those who are jumping the line might actually be delaying someone else getting access to it? Or are they doing pretty well in terms of being able to vaccinate those who are qualified, who are trying to get it?
We did hear some reports of long lines in Florida towards the beginning of rollout. I'm not sure if that situation has resolved, but I think a lot of people did see sort of news stories and pictures on Twitter of a lot of elderly people waiting in line and then getting turned away, sent home because they were out of vaccine doses at like 10 o'clock in the morning. So in cases like that, it's hard to say whether there were vaccine tourists getting the vaccines that were used up earlier that morning, but it is possible that that could be the case.
And what has the reaction been so far from the state government?
Well, vaccine tourism might be on the decline actually, because the state government issued a public health advisory kind of prohibiting it. They said that they are reserving their vaccine doses for part-time residents and full-time residents only. So that is yes to snowbirds, but no to vaccine tourists. Whether they enforce that is another question.
Yeah, you have a quote from DeSantis in your article that he doesn't seem to be particularly bothered by it, at least based off of that. I mean, maybe there's some context necessary, but it didn't seem like it was really bothering him that might be happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of public health experts would actually agree with that in general, getting vaccines in arms is a good thing. And if these are people who are in the community for part-time, whether they're visiting family or have a part-time residence there, it would be good for the community for them to be vaccinated and increase the herd immunity there. So I think in that vein, the governor's not discouraging people who are truly in the Florida community from getting vaccinated, but he is discouraging people from flying in with the intention of getting their vaccine there because it's easier than doing it at home.
Well, and I imagine that unnecessary flying during the worst part of the pandemic has its own risks. Does like the CDC or has the White House provided any sort of guidance to try to stop people from doing this, especially traveling long distance, perhaps by air for this purpose?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because you have a camp of people on one side who are saying airplanes in a vacuum are relatively safe places. Like they're well ventilated, people are supposed to wear masks, but when you kind of take that perspective, you're not considering the other aspects of travel, like what you're doing in the community you're traveling to, what you could be bringing back to your home community, and then also sort of the steps in between, like the airport, the Uber, wherever else people might be going on their way. So I think in that sense, there are a lot of risks of travel, and I think a lot of public health experts would discourage unnecessary travel.
Exactly, and to anyone watching this who's perhaps thinking about engaging in cross-country vaccine tourism, if you've gone this long without getting COVID, traveling and perhaps exposing yourself to it seems like the last thing that you'd actually want, so I would tread carefully there. But in any event, anyone watching this who'd like some more information, Andrea's work is available on Business Insider. You can see her article breaking down vaccine tourism in more detail, and we really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks again for having me.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.